With that, Jesse, let me just throw this to you. Are you ready for rapid fire?
I am. This is just an overall great day. We go straight from having Tariq right into some rapid fire. So
I know we got all kinds of other topics that we can get to here tonight. What do you consider spring priority number one for the Notre Dame football team?
what I consider to be the spring priority for the Notre Dame football team is just continuity and meshing of a lot of new faces in some kind of big positions within the Notre Dame Notre Dame's football overall. There's a new quarterback coming in. There's a new offensive coordinator. There's a new quarterbacks coach. There's a new offensive line coach. There's guys leaving. There's new guys stepping up. There's going to be underclassmen coming in from last season that now have their shot to now are getting a bigger, better shot to prove themselves. So overall, I just want to see this new, the new number one priority is the continuity and how this team comes together. Because I think all of the talent, I believe all the talent is there. It's just a matter of how this group is going to come together as kind of one whole unit.
Yeah, I would just kind of say that specifically to the offensive side of the ball, with all the changes being on that side of the ball, between
Yeah.
bringing in Sam Hartman and the continuity he's got to have overall in the offense, but specifically with the receivers. And you've got a new offensive coordinator, you've got a new offensive line coach, you've got a new quarterback coach as well. So that's where all the change is this year. So I think it's finding that continuity, finding their rhythm, figuring out what it is they're going to be. And obviously, there's you got to sort out the pecking order with the wide receivers. You got to figure out, at least get started figuring out who those two guards are going to be in that kind of thing. Those are priorities as well. But I think just that continuity and that mesh on that side of the ball with so many changes is my priority number one.
Yeah, and kind of looking at it, from a defensive perspective, to me, it comes down to what have we learned from a second or in your second season essentially, because Tariq kind of touched on it. There's differences when you go from having a different defensive coordinator every year for the last 3 years, and him kind of alluding to some of the complexities of Golden's defense. So I think defensively there needs to be we need to see more knowledge, or more that the defense is more understood this season, and being able to execute at a faster and higher overall level, I think has to be the priority on the defense.
Yeah, I agree with that. And they've obviously got to figure out what the secondary is going to look like, figure out the defensive line, or any of the young linebackers going to make a move. And I saw someone on the board say today that no one ever talks about Prince Kali when they talk about the young linebackers. I think we've brought Prince Kali.
He's always spoken about, I think.
Yeah, Prince Kali and Jalen Sneed. Obviously, there's opportunity for them. I think the question is, can they make a big enough move? And
And
what's
yeah,
that
and
going to look
that's
like?
really that's what Tariq was talking about, is just having that understanding of the playbook, and that's what those younger guys are going to have to be able to demonstrate in order to get their shot, is just knowing, just engulfing in that playbook and understanding why things are a certain way. And like he said, Golden teaches something and has clear expectations for why he's doing it. So understanding how those things go together, I think, has to be those younger guys' top priority.
Yeah, for sure. So Jesse, if I told you Marcus Freeman will be as successful over the next two seasons as Niele Ivey has been over her last two seasons, including this one, of course, what does that look like for Marcus Freeman?
I thought about this one for a little bit. Niele Ivey is now, she won the regular season ACC tournament. She's in back-to-back Sweet 16s. And I think, even the Sweet 16 is overlooked. You are one of the top 16 teams in the country. So to me, winning, obviously Notre Dame can't win a regular season championship. They don't, play in that for a conference tournament championship or any of that stuff. So combining that success along with being one of the final 16 teams in the country, I think that would look like, Marcus Freeman getting into the playoffs almost would be my opinion. Or, I would hate to say one game short, because I feel like that doesn't even kind of match the level of success that Neil's had. So I think getting into the playoffs, honestly, and being on that national stage is the next step, or what that would look like for Marcus Freeman.
Yeah, I think this year it means you're back in it at the very least a New Year's Six bowl
Right.
because like if you're
Like a
gonna,
10 and above season, I think
yeah,
would be the bare minimum.
yeah, exactly. Like you're around 10 wins and you're in a New Year's Six bowl this year. Next year, because there's going to be a college football, the college football playoff is going to expand next year. Next year, you're in the playoffs. I think that's what it looks like. That would be, it's obviously apples and oranges when you're talking about basketball and football anyway, but I think that is what it looks like. And continue to recruit at an elite level because why has Niele Ivey been able to do this? It's not
She's a
just
great recruiter.
not just strategic. Yes, that's absolutely right. A great recruiter. She's bringing in elite players. And Marcus Freeman is a great recruiter as well. And his
Maybe
staff
that's
is,
why they get along so well and they support each other so much, is they're just very
maybe so.
similar in their coaching. Great coaches, great techniques, great leaders of people, like Tariq said, knowing how to string together a group of people
Right.
and get the success that you need.
That's right. By the way, we talked about this a little bit at the start of yesterday's show, and there are more reports out within the last couple hours that it is apparently looking like Micah Shrewsbury from Penn State is going to be Mike Brey's
Really?
replacement as head
I
coach.
love
Now,
that as like a
now,
very first kind of, you know, I think that has a lot of potential, and I think that Shrewsbury is a guy who could help elevate the program and which the kind of players that he can get and the style in which he plays. Because Penn State, they were a very solid team this season, and
yeah,
he proved through good coaching, because they didn't start so hot, that good coaching and getting out of the most out of his players can lead to the success that I think Notre Dame is looking for as well.
yeah, and I mean, he's not a guy who 2 months ago probably anyone was talking about. In part because of what you're talking about, they didn't start off that great, but then here comes Penn State, and they're the 10 seed in the Big Ten, and they end up playing in the Big Ten championship game, and they make it to the NCAA tournament. And he's only been there for a couple of years, and I think you're right. Like I think just based on what we've seen from him as both a developer of talent and someone who can recruit and just the whole picture, I think that would be a really good hire for Notre Dame. And like when you look at the other guys who are out, it's like, do you want someone who has already had some success in a Power Five conference at a place like Penn State, which is obviously a football school, or do you want some like these mid-major type guys who are both in the tournament as well, Colgate and Drake and private institutions in the whole thing? And I think he would be a really good fit if they ended up. And like that would be based on who's out there, who's available, who makes sense, the whole thing. I think that he would be a home run hire if they are able to land him.
Same. I really like that. If that, obviously nothing's official, but the sound of it sounds great.
Yeah. Romlek said he really thought that they would land Tom Izzo. Now, apparently, Penn State is going to make a big, again, I think this was John Rothstein from CBS who was reporting this, that Penn State is expected to make a big counteroffer. But we'll see. It's all kind of happening right now. So could be Micah Shrewsbury. That would be very interesting. So tonight is the championship, the final game, the finals of the World Baseball Classic. You've got the USA versus Japan, but you've got players like New York Mets closer Edwin Diaz, who blew out his knee while celebrating a WBC win last week. Astros second baseman, Jose Altuve, suffered a fractured thumb during the WBC. And a lot of people are saying they should be playing it, at least when they're playing it right now during spring training before the season and all that kind of stuff. Which option do you like better? Do you keep it where it is? Do you move it to November? I'll throw another one in there. Do you play it during the All-Star break? Because I saw that suggested today. Or do you just get rid of the World Baseball Classic? What do you think?
I think immediately there are two that are off the table for me. It's one would be get rid of it. And 2 would be move it to All-Star break. So that to me is keep it where it's at, or move it to November at the end of the season. And honestly, the Edwin Diaz and Jose Altuve thing, yeah, it sucks, but it just happens. It's just those crazy things that go unexplained. Like, how long has Altuve played baseball his whole life, and he's never gotten hit in the thumb and fractured, or got hit in the thumb and fractured it. So you can't tell me that it's just only something that happens in the WBC. And no, it's just something that happens, potentially can happen when you play baseball. And it's just like, with Edwin Diaz, I'm sure that he's jumped up and down or, celebrated before, and nothing's happened to his knee. It's just, these are freak accident situations that are being kind of blamed on the WBC. And I like where the WBC is right now, because at the end of the season, I think that there's actually a better chance of someone getting hurt because you have more fatigue on your body, you have more strain on your body, and then you're kind of revving up to play even more games. So right now, as you're getting into the swing of the season, and a lot of these guys, you're playing to win, but it's also a great opportunity for these guys to get back in, to baseball shape, baseball condition. And to me, it's like, it would be better than spring training. I would like it as a player because I feel like it's more competitive. I feel like I could really develop more in the preseason aspect of it. Obviously, you're missing, some of the weeks with your teammates and that kind of stuff. But again, as pure baseball, I like where it's at. I love the WBC. I mean, have you not seen the USA game in the quarterfinals where Trey Turner hits a grand slam to, propel the US back? Or even last night when Japan hits a walk-off, double in the bottom of the ninth against Mexico. Like, we're seeing very good baseball games. It's just unfortunate some of these bad things are happening.
Yeah. I'm intrigued about the November thing. I get what you're saying about the fatigue and all that, because you would be playing it at the end of the year. Like, if you started it, like right after the World Series, and you would be going up against football and all that kind of stuff in terms of interest here. But, they play it because not just of what's going on in the United States. Like, the World Baseball Classic is a much bigger deal to virtually every other country besides the United States, and I don't mind keeping it here. And you're right. A lot of these injuries are just random. Like, they could just as easily have been injured in a spring training game as, getting injured in a real game. And Tommy Gunn says, keep it where it is and let them adults decide to play or not. I mean, isn't that what it comes down to? Like, no one's forcing these guys to do it. They don't have to be there. Let them make their own decision. I definitely would not want it during the All-Star break. One, the All-Star break is not long enough.
And it's a break.
And two, it's a break. Yeah, that's exactly right. The players want a break. Like, right now, these guys are basically playing real competitive games in lieu of spring training games that nobody cares about. So what's the harm? And these pitchers all have pitch counts and stuff like that. So keep it where it is. I don't understand why everyone's getting all worked up about it. But by the way, I saw this today. Ticket demand is through the roof for this Japan USA game. The average ticket price, apparently, according to a report, $185, 255% more expensive than the average price of a major league game last season. That's according to TickPick.
There's always a reason for tickets to be expensive.
Right. All right, next question. Today is March 21st, or 3/21. Have you watched the Purge movies? Have you seen the Purge movies, Jesse?
I watched the first couple, but like, some things, there's just, they draw it out too long. There's only so many Purge movies.
Yes. So if you've seen the Purge movies, 3/21, March 21st, is the annual day of the Purge. If you could purge one thing from sports, what would it be?
So I thought about this for a while, and I was like, should I tinker with something like a serious, drastic rule? Would I change? There's a lot of people who have very kind of fun ideas about this, and I wish I could think if there was one that was like there was a quarterback and he just like completely. I think it was like Mahomes one time. He was talking about how like it just I can't remember, but I took a more fun side of this, I guess is what I'm trying to get to.
Okay. Okay.
I would allow fighting in sports as long as it was warranted without repercussions. Like hockey, I'd be all for the, the ice fights without guys getting sent to penalty. I think there's situations sometimes where, maybe in baseball, when guys start throwing at each other a little bit, or guys are starting to slide, with spikes and that kind of stuff. Like, I'm all for in certain situations where sometimes you just need to let, blow some steam off, and then both sides go back to their side and there be no repercussions. So I hate to say, like, bring organized boxing to sports, but like, I feel like sometimes you should just be able to kind of go at it a little bit and then just go your separate ways.
I like that. T-Gun says purge unwritten rules. Technically, I don't know if you could purge unwritten rules because they're unwritten. So they're not actually, tangible to be purged. But I get what you're saying. I would go with the in-game sideline reporter. It annoys me to no end. And they're taking it to a new level during the NCAA tournament with, on CBS, the men's tournament anyway, with, like you grab the coach and you get them. And they're only getting one question, so at least they're being limited. But seriously, the in-game interview, the coach is supposed to be coaching. Like the mid-major coaches, I think, love it because, like, that's the first time they've probably been on TV. They're on national TV. They're in the tournament. They've actually got someone there asking questions. Like, I know Tobin Anderson, who we're going to talk about here in a minute, loves it. But the in-game interview, sideline interview, is the most innocuous, just totally worthless thing in sports, I think, right now. Get rid of them. Agree or disagree?
I'm just not as opinionated as on it as you. I could care less either way, really. Is it awkward and is it unneeded? Sure, but it doesn't, I'm not like, that's so stupid. Why are they wasting my time?
Yeah. Well, the TV networks pony up the big money, and so they're ponying up the bigger money. So they're like, oh, we want more access. So they're giving them access. It's like it's not enough just to talk to a coach at halftime or something walking on and off the court. I don't know. Nothing comes out of those interviews. So Doug Gottlieb says he would leave his radio job for the right college basketball head coaching position. Here's my question. Who would you rather have, Gottlieb or now apparently former Fairleigh Dickinson head coach and current Iona head coach, Tobin Anderson?
Wow, that happened very quickly.
It
Patina
did.
to St. John's, and then Tobin to Iona. That all happened very quickly. But first of all, I want to know, like, who Doug Gottlieb thinks is going to hire him. Like, does he think he's in like high demand to coach basketball? Like,
he apparently interviewed at like one of the Wisconsin direction, like one of the mid-major Wisconsin schools.
Interesting. I'm not a huge Doug Gottlieb guy. I know he knows basketball. I know he, played basketball, and he obviously did some things to to get in trouble while playing basketball. So I'm more of a guy like Tobin Anderson. I think he's kind of, how do I say it? Maybe not worked harder for it, but as a coach, I just feel like I could trust him more. I feel like I would just, like, he has a more love of the game. It's more genuine, and he's just kind of worked really hard to get to where he's at. So I would go with Tobin.
Yeah, I mean, he's got it seems like he's got a good personality. And I mean, he parlayed that Purdue thing into something, just landing that Iona job. And like, this is a guy who was a Division II coach for a long time, but that's the biggest reason. Whether he was coaching at Division II or not, Gottlieb is on the radio. Does he know basketball? Sure, he knows basketball. He played and all that kind of stuff. There's other things that he did that we don't have to talk about here, but he played. He knows basketball, sure. But has he been a coach? No. The answer is no. Like he hasn't been a head coach anyway. And Tobin Anderson has been a head coach for a long time. And that's what I don't get. Like, people even entertaining bringing on Doug Gottlieb as their head coach because he hasn't even been an assistant. He hasn't paid his dues as an actual basketball coach and gone out and done it. So Tobin Anderson has, even though nobody had heard of the guy a week ago, he beat a number 1 seed in the NCAA tournament. And it's still crazy that Fairleigh Dickinson wouldn't have even been in the tournament if not for Merrimack transitioning to Division I this year. And here goes FDU, and they beat Purdue in the first round. And now, not even a week later, Tobin Anderson's got a promotion out of it, going to
It's
Iona.
all crazy. Just one opportunity after another, just compounding on top of each other.
For sure. Fill in the blank. It's blank that women's number 1 seeds, Stanford and Indiana, both lost in the second round of the tournament this weekend.
It is, to me, astonishing that both of those teams lost, because you see more upsets in the men's game, sure, but I feel like more often than not, 1s and 2s in college women's basketball make it down to at least the Sweet 16, Elite 8, like every single year. Like it's a more consistent game in terms of the higher seeds win. The higher seeds usually funnel down and are some of the last remaining teams. Like you might see a Final Four where all 1 seeds make it on the women's side. Like that is not uncommon, I guess is what I'm trying to get at. So when you see 2 teams go out in the round of 32 that are number 1s, like that is crazy to me. And then overall, excuse me, I think it's even crazier that both IU teams, men's and women's, lost to the Miami teams in the same round.
That's
round of
crazy.
32, different seeds, and both teams. The School of Miami owns IU in basketball right now. It's just kind of crazy to think. I don't know if that's ever happened before. Has a team been eliminated by the same team in the same round in the same year of NCAA tournaments?
Both men's and women's. Yeah. Good question. I couldn't answer that, but what I can tell you, this is just the second time since the tournament expanded to 64 teams in 1994 that 2 number 1 seeds didn't reach the regional semifinals. The only other time was 1998. So, like, this is very rare that, the women's number 1 seeds lose, especially multiples. It's also the second time in the past 6 years that no double-digit seeds reached the round of 16. And I think that it is, like Tommy said, that it proves that Notre Dame should have been a number 1. I don't know about number 1, but at least a number 2 when you look at how things have shook out so far. But I think it's good for the women's tournament. Like the fact, because typically it's chalk all the way for like number 1s and number 2 seeds, like with few exceptions. Typically the one, you see so many 1 seeds breezing all the way to the Final Four, maybe a 2 in there or whatever. More and more, you're starting to see some of this. And so I think that it is good for, the overall stature of the women's tournament, because for so long, it has been a tournament that is devoid of real upsets. And so now you're finally getting upsets and seeing some exciting games. Like, I was watching the end of that Miami-Indiana game last night, and it was really exciting. Miami was ahead most of the game. Indiana tied it up, and then I think they even took a 1-point lead for a little bit, like in the last minute of the game before Miami came back again. And Indiana was one of the teams that there was some argument about whether or not they deserve to be a number 1 seed. I don't know if this validates it or not, but it's good for the ACC, and it's good for the women's tournament overall to see that that some of these top seeds can be beaten in the early rounds. And I think the transfer portal has a lot to do with it. Like moving players. I think the transfer portal actually has a lot to do with what's gone on in this men's tournament this year as well, with players moving all over the place.
All sports across the NCAA level of bridging or narrowing that talent gap between the very top teams and the bottom teams. We're seeing that talent gap shrink, and I just think that's going to be a common trend going forward. Is you're going to see, like, look at Kansas State this year. Their whole entire men's team this season that is now in the Sweet 16 basically came from the transfer portal. So that's just a big leading case of what we're kind of talking about.
Romlick says Sean is lying. He was watching Quantum League. DVR, my friend. DVR.
And Derek, it took me a while to figure out that was you, but your true identity has now come back.
Yes. We added him last night for sure. All right. Miami guard Destiny Harden dropped an F-bomb. Speaking of that Miami-Indiana game, Miami guard Destiny Harden dropped an F-bomb live on ESPN2 last night after the win over Indiana. It was during the post-game interview. She's sitting down. It was the on-camera interview. It wasn't just a sideline reporter where they're still celebrating and stuff. She sat down with the play-by-play announcer and the analyst and dropped an F-bomb during the interview. I don't know if you happen to see it or not, but do you blame Harden for dropping it, or do you blame ESPN for letting it slip through?
Yeah, I really don't have anything to, any sort of judgment on this one, because honestly, I think about this quite often, actually. Like, if I were in a big time moment and I was being like interviewed and just overall excited, adrenaline, a big game, big win, like I would be scared that it would slip out naturally just because of, pure excitement and those things. So I totally feel for her, and I have no problem with it. It's definitely not a big deal. And if ESPN thought it was a big deal, then we're on lag. Like they have time to be able to.
They could have.
You see it on NBA games all the time where guys
Right.
are yelling courtside, dropping F-bombs courtside, and all of a sudden you won't hear anything. Well, it's because they picked up a guy that's mad in the moment. So it's definitely possible, and if they cared that much, I think it's on them to cover it up.
Man, we've got like a whole chat full of salty people. It's not just salty Virginia peanuts. Like everyone's salty about this right now. Who cares? What difference? It's like it was jarring because it just doesn't happen. And it wasn't like the way she did it. I was watching it when it happened, and they asked her a question, and I think it was like, what the conversation was on the bench before, they went back out to the floor for the shot that she hit that ended up being the game winner. And she said one of the assistants told her to go win the effing game. And of course, he didn't say effing. He said the actual word, which she repeated during the interview. And it's just jarring when you hear that, because they generally bleep it. One, they bleep it if it does happen, but two, it's like you don't hear players, and you especially don't hear women's players dropping them, So it was a little bit jarring when it happened. ESPN, I agree. They've got to be not I agree. I think they've got to be a little bit more on top of it if it really matters. But like when you were talking about it, like you remember The Last Dance. Did you watch The Last Dance on ESPN?
I think
when
so.
It came out?
I watched most of it.
There were a lot of F-bombs on that, and they had two different channels. I think on the main ESPN it was bleeped, and maybe on ESPN2 they played the unfiltered version, and they told you up front. So it is cable, so technically they don't have to worry as much about it. You just very rarely see it, So that's again why it was so jarring, because I was not expecting an effing F-bomb in the post game of the Miami Indiana women's game. So, hey, good luck to Miami. Good weekend for the ACC, and Notre Dame, of course, off to the Sweet 16 this week. And we found out tip-off time, 11:30 Saturday morning. We've got the early game for the second year in a row. We had the early game last year up in Connecticut against North Carolina State as well.
How many games are being played that day on the court?
That's a good question.
Is it 2 or 4?
I'd have to look at the actual schedule. There will be 4 games for sure. I think they're playing. I don't know that they're playing them all on the same day, is what I'm trying to say. I don't know, because there's technically 2 different regions that are there. So I don't know if
find it weird.
I don't know if it's 2 Saturday, 2 Sunday or not.
I find it weird that that's the time to go with. Like, it's I doubt that any of those teams have played a game that early all season.
Right. Let me actually look here real quick, and I'll see if I can tell you. Let's see. I'm going to pull it up since you're asking. No, there are 2 games on Saturday. There's an 11:30 game, Notre Dame, Maryland, and then UCLA, South Carolina play at 2:00. And then the next day, actually, hold it. The day before that, there will be 2 games there as well. Villanova and Miami, as well as LSU and Utah. That's in the other region, the Greenville 2 region. So there'll be 2 games there on Friday, 2 games there on Saturday. They will not play 4 in the same day.
Interesting.
Yeah, I think so as well. But it's, the 11:30, regardless of how many other games, I guess is just about TV because you do still have more games to go, at other regions, basically.
That's a good point.
Because you've still got, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 games. It looks, I see. There are 2 other NCAA tournament games, and then there'll be a couple NIT games I'm seeing on the schedule here as well later.
Have you ever been to South Carolina's campus?
I have not been to. It's not at. It's not in their campus. It is Greenville, South Carolina. So it's an actual neutral site. So.
Have you been there before? Have you been in that arena? Have they played in that arena before?
The only time I've been there was actually in 2002. I was talking to Tom Noy about this the other day. 2002, the Notre Dame men, Mike Brey and the Notre Dame men were in the NCAA tournament in this arena in Greenville. It was called something else back then, but they played Charlotte and then they played Duke in their first 2 games. The women were playing in Knoxville, Tennessee, which is about 2.5 or so hours away. And like the women played on, I think like the men played Thursday, the women played Friday, and then it alternated like that. And so because of like the off days, there was a little group of us. We rented a car and we actually drove the 2.5 hours back and forth and watched the men's games down there.
Nice.
Yeah. So that's my one experience down there.
Well, I hope it's enjoyable.
Am I going to be able to get up that early?
That was funny. That's what I was laughing at.
That is like every day I'm up early, so that will not be a problem.
Don't you? It might be the opposite. Don't you wish you could sleep later?
I do wish I could sleep a little bit later. It's the 8 o'clock and 9 o'clock games that bug me. So that's just where we are. And no, Jesse is not going down to South Carolina.
I don't think I've ever been to South Carolina. That's what sparked me in asking if you've been to South Carolina. Because I remember you used to have that map in your office and you pinned every place you've been, and it felt like it was
that's right.
Been about everywhere.
That's right.
In your travels. So
I forgot about that. Yep. A lot of holes in the wall by the time I pulled the pins out. All right. Well, that's going to do it for tonight. Appreciate the questions that we had for Tariq Bracy, and of course appreciate Tariq Bracy earlier in the show as well. So glad that you were able to take part in that and see that and had some good.
Yeah, anyone that's just getting here, make sure and scroll back and listen to that interview because Tariq was great. Yep. And it was just awesome getting to hear some of his insight as he prepares for his big pro day.
Yep. Just download the podcast in the morning if you want to. It'll be
take a nice, take your dog for a nice walk and
there you go.
The interview in.
That's how you do it. All right. Well, we're going to be here tomorrow, first day of Notre Dame spring football practice tomorrow morning. We'll be out there. And then Marcus Freeman has a press conference scheduled for a little bit before 10 a.m. tomorrow. And so on tomorrow's show, we'll have some of Marcus Freeman's press conference comments. So that's what's coming up on tomorrow's show. So until then, we will talk to you later. Have a good one. IB Nation Sports Talk.